Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. Over the past few weeks, there have been multiple shootings in the public spotlight. Just this week, a gunman killed 4 in a church in Michigan. 3 of these recent shootings have one thing in common. The suspects have been identified by experts as terminally online. That's true of the killing of the right-wing activist Charlie Kirk, the teen who opened fire at a school in Colorado, and the suspect who killed a detainee at an ICE facility in Texas. Pasha Dashgard is the director of research for the Peril Lab, which studies online extremism. He joins WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez to talk about the rhetoric around the motives of these shootings.
It feels like there's no one that's kind of more in the spotlight than Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk. And a lot of focus has been kind of like on this potential transgender roommate/lover, but less conversation. It feels like almost on Robinson himself, who seems quite isolated, spent a lot of time online. Was there anything that you took from his story in particular that signals something new or just reinforced what you already know?
I think the way that the media has covered it as like, is he far right? Is he far left? Is he trans? Is he like... I think that concept is really kind of old, frankly, for people who are in the like extremism research space. We've kind of moved past that. There's a sense in which being terminally online is itself radicalizing, and it desensitizes you and it normalizes violence and gore and sort of like this really extreme kind of content that, frankly, I don't think parents or teachers really understand how bad this content is and how easily accessible it is. And so my perspective was like, when I saw all these like real in the weeds, obscure memes written on the bullet casings and stuff, it's like, I don't know what that kid's politics are. I actually kind of don't think it matters what he like ostensibly what we think his politics are. That's somebody who was radicalized by extremist content on the internet. At a certain point, ideological left, right, liberal, conservative, that stuff kind of all breaks down. And it's just really more about like being extreme, speaking to your community, right? Like, I think there was like some news story about like text messages between him and a friend about this shooting, where he's like, oh my God, if like Fox News anchor reads about bulges, I'm going to die. That's actually like a really important data point for us as researchers to understand, is like, this is a performative type of violence. The amount of worshiping of mass shooters as like martyrs or as like role models in a perverse sort of sense, that's a very real thing. There's a sense in which the political leanings, it's kind of like, I mean, in general, like our politics are kind of upended, but in this context with these kinds of people, it's like, it doesn't matter, frankly, who this guy voted for. Like we're so far past that. This violence was done for a community of his community of terminally online people who are going to laugh and understand the references he's making.
It feels like there's just this very stark binary that people are trying to make sense of motivations for political points for whatever reason there is, instead of understanding the root cause. From a parent's point of view, what are kind of like the warning signs that they may be seeing in their young kids that they are kind of like leaning into these online spaces that are just filled with meme culture and, you know, mass shooter worship?
So some of those red flags are changes in behavior, isolation, changes in clothing, changes in language, right? If they start really referencing a bunch of memes, they start talking about Chads and Stacys and alphas and sigmas, and like some of that stuff is like so mainstream now that it like doesn't actually indicate radicalization, but there are terms and phrases and ideas that are still referencing really obscure far right or like alt platforms. But I mean, it's like interest in buying weapons. It's interest in more violence or sort of condoning violence as a solution to problems. It's this kind of like black and white thinking that, it's us versus them. It's my group is incompatible with the existence of this out group. Some of this is just mental health stuff, right? Where it's like isolation, alienation, ostracization, hopelessness. So many of these supremacist ideologies are like rooted in this idea of hopelessness, that there's nothing you can do. You were born short, you're born with the wrong shaped jaw, and so now you should just die alone. Think about how painful that is for somebody who's like struggling with insecurity or, feeling sort of unfulfilled, that it's like, it's never going to get better. There's nothing you can do to change it. The world is against you. And then you can see how like the next step in that statement is like, so what are you going to do? Who should you punish in order to make up for this? And that's how you get from a 15-year-old kid who's like insecure to a mass shooter.
You've painted a very clear picture on how the radicalization happens or how the hopelessness happens in these spaces. Are these spaces also providing the targets or the villains to be on the other end of these mass shootings? Like how do they also use their platforms to direct these young isolated men and boys into knowing who is the target?
100%. I mean, that's the other half of it, right? Is it's like they have a list of enemies. If this is my in group, then who's the out group? The out group depends who you're talking, like depends which toxic online space we're talking about, but typically it's women, feminists, Jews, Black people, Muslims, immigrants, refugees, and then you build out from, they're trying to undermine our way of life. They're trying to take what has been ours.
I reached out to you because there are young people in my life and I wish they would all make great choices online, which I know that they do not. And the first time I came across your work was the Parent and Caretaker Guide. And if you could just tell, just to kind of like a breakdown of what other parents and caretakers should know about all of the work that you put into this guide and kind of how it could help them as they're kind of trying to learn how to navigate these spaces with their own young people in their lives.
The Parent and Caregiver Guide emerged out of COVID. Peril was working with Southern Poverty Law Center, and we kind of realized like, oh God, this is a real confluence of a couple of different factors that are going to make things really bad in terms of online radicalization. So you had a bunch of young kids who were online more than ever because they were, going to school remotely. And then when they were done, there was nowhere for them to go. So they had to like be online more than ever. Parents were monitoring their kids' behavior less than ever because recall that parents also were working remotely. So mom and dad are like working and the children are on the computer completely unmonitored. Nobody knows what's happening with them over there. And then you had all these conspiracy theories, all this misinformation just running rampant online. So we wrote a guide that was like, what do parents need to know? What are like the red flags and warning signs? What are strategies for talking to your kids? Like what is a rabbit hole? What is a filter bubble? What is an algorithm? Like really giving people like very basic digital literacy, media literacy, background in extremism, like how do extremist groups operate? How do they radicalize people? So like sort of an information component, but then also a behavior component. What can I do? How do I have these conversations effectively? And then this is something that Peril really sort of sets us apart from a lot of other research labs, is that we test our guides rigorously before we put them out in the world. So we did a huge study of the Parent and Caregiver Guide, so we could immediately see how much did we shift people's knowledge and intention to act. We got a bunch of really cool data. My favorite of which is 12% of people who read our guide either joined or created a group about youth radicalization after reading the guide.
Okay.
11% of people used the information found in the guide to interrupt radicalization of a young person in their life. So this is like real stuff is happening, right? Like it's not just cool, it's not just theoretical. It's like people really did use this information to help young people in their own life.
So I heard you mention the study before, and I was very curious what some of the takeaway was. But basically what it sounds like is what you've learned immediately and then over time is that it helps parents and caregivers with a language, with a foothold into like having these conversations. I would love to, while we have a couple more minutes, just talk about what are some of the strategies to interrupt or to be present or to even like engage with, let's say, teens who may be some of the most difficult demographics to like have a conversation with.
The first thing I'll say is it's hard, right? Like it's not easy. Let's just like, there's no magic bullet. There's no like secret set of words that is going to work to like unlock your teen. The second thing I'd say though, is like, this isn't the only conversation you're going to have about this. So don't approach this like, I gotta get everything out. I'm going to take a kid who's like, going down the Andrew Tate rabbit hole and I'm going to turn him into a, feminist by the end of the conversation. Like, that's not what's going to happen, right? You're trying to open up dialogue rather than shut it down. And so come from a place, as hard as this can be, come from a place of curiosity, come from a place of non-judgmental, like a non-judgmental place. You need to ask the kid, like, ultimately, what is appealing to you about this? What does he say? What does this person say or do that sort of resonates with you? What's the hurt behind the reason that you're doing this? I said before, I'm a social psychologist. I didn't come to this work from the perspective of like terrorism studies or like violence prevention. Like I came at this as a psychologist. And one of the things that's very obvious about this work is that we over-index on ideology. It's actually not that important. You ask some incel about like the tenets of inceldom, they don't know. You ask some white supremacist about like, have you read the Turner Diaries? Have you read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion? It's like, no, they're there because of emotional reasons. They're there because of relationships. When you think about what attracts people to these kinds of movements, often it is that they meet psychological needs that aren't being met in other ways.
Pasha Dashgard is the founder of research for the Peril Lab, which studies online extremism. He spoke with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. You can find more interviews like this one by visiting wuwm.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.